behind the scenes, we did everything that we could. We did everything legally that we could do. And for those that were saying that they'd go in and bust down doors and do whatever it took to end up in jail, because from jail, I can't do anything. So I still stand by what I said, is that I did everything that I could with the knowledge that I had and within the legal rights to Ruby and Kevin. The one person that could have done something within his legal right was Kevin. We had zero contact with him. It was Kevin's job to check in on things, and he did not. So when I
Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Midlife Revolution. Welcome to True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Megan Connor. And that was Bonnie Holline, Ruby Franke's sister. She has 1.39 million subscribers on YouTube. And this was her statement a year ago after her sister was sentenced to prison time for the abuse of her two youngest children, along with Jodi Hildebrandt. It's a disturbing case. It's one that I have followed very closely from the beginning, given the fact that it is where I always sit at the intersection of high demand religion, true crime, and narcissism. Back in January, when the Hulu documentary came out detailing the horrors that went on behind closed doors in Jodi Hildebrandt's compound in southern Utah, I went on Mormon Stories podcast with Lauren Matthias of Hidden True Crime and with our friend Mindy Caldwell to talk about the documentary and about Shari Franke's book, The House of My Mother. As you can see, I still have it here. It's always on the bookshelf behind me. It's marked up, and I refer to it often when I am thinking and talking about this case. Today in the news, Kevin Franke has filed a new lawsuit. It was actually a few days ago, but you know, I'm never the first one on the scene. I'm never going to take the scoop out of somebody else's hands. I like to read the news articles and listen to the people talk about it and consider my opinions before I comment. So I want to dig into the lawsuit, the most recent lawsuit that Kevin Franke has filed. I want to give you some updates on where the family is right now. And I specifically want to talk about the controversy over Kevin. Some people love him. Some people hate him. Some people think it was all his fault. Some people think it was none of his fault. And some people are somewhere in between. I'm really, really curious to know what the rest of you beautiful humans think about this situation where Kevin was clearly gaslit, abused, controlled by two women that he should have been able to trust, his wife and his supposed therapist. But does that excuse his negligence in taking care of his children? According to his statement to police just after the arrest of Jodi and Ruby, Kevin hadn't spoken to his children in over a year. He had no idea that they were staying down in southern Utah with Jodi Hildebrandt. He thought that they were safe at home with his estranged wife, who had ordered him and his oldest son out of the house at the behest of Jodi Hildebrandt. So I'm curious about what you think about all this. Now, this is a little bit of it's less of a deep dive than we normally do because it's about a lawsuit after the fact. The perpetrators have been arrested. They've pled guilty. They have been sentenced, and they are now serving time in prison. The children are hopefully healing. We know that from the documentary, Kevin Franke has full custody of all of his minor children at this point. Some people question whether that's a good thing or not. This is a lot to unpack, but we're just going to skim the surface tonight because I am fresh coming out of my cousin's case. I'm not ready to do any huge deep dives, but I will tell you one secret. There's a case coming up that is no closer to the intersection of true crime, high demand religion, and narcissism than the case of Donna Adelson. The Adelson case started way back in 2016 with a shocking shooting and has since resulted in the conviction of 4 separate people on different charges related to this shooting. It was an enmeshed Jewish family that wanted the best for their daughter, who was in a contentious divorce with her former spouse. And she really wanted to take the children and move to be closer to her parents, but he was not allowing it. And what ended up happening was a wild and crazy true crime deep dive that I will be getting to. Donna Adelson is about to go on trial, and I'm going to be covering that case. So that's what's coming up. Eliza, you have a good point here, and it sort of sums up how I feel about a lot of this. I think in that situation, when you're surrounded by a cult that is backed up by your whole community, it's really hard to judge a man who may be trying to do the right thing. We cannot discount the fact that the Frankes were in a very close-knit Mormon community. And when you grow up in Mormonism, when you believe Mormonism, there are a lot of family community dynamics, religious and theocratic dynamics that overlap to create all kinds of strange situations. And it's one of the reasons why I think we're seeing so much true crime happening in the Mormon space these days. But I will highly recommend to you that you watch the Hulu documentary that covers 8 passengers. It is truly eye-opening. There's definitely footage in that documentary that hasn't been seen on the 8 Passengers channel before. And yes, I apologize that so many of us are out here at the same time. Peter Higgs, welcome in. Good to see you. Thanks so much to all of you who are my regular watchers. And if you're new to the channel, thank you so much for being here. Please take a second to subscribe to the channel. Over half of the people who watch my videos are not subscribers, and it really just is the best free way to support the channel. Now, if you're able to financially support, I do have a Patreon where I do all kinds of bonus content, outtakes from my videos, singing, piano playing, cooking, and sometimes just writing my thoughts and writing scripts for upcoming videos. So you get the sneak peeks and the fun stuff first over on Patreon. In addition, I do have an e-course where I talk about how to combat manipulation and control, how to have more peaceful relationships with the unpeaceful people in your life. So you can check that out in the video description. All the links are down there. And I appreciate you being here. So we're going to go now to the lawsuit that Kevin most recently filed. Now, some of you may remember that he filed a different lawsuit a while back. We did go over that. There is an episode on my channel about it. And we're going to talk a little bit at the end of this video about where all of that stands and what is next for Kevin Franke. I've also noted he's done a couple of interviews recently. He said famously, I'm not going to go on Dr. Phil or anybody else, but he's gone on some smaller channels to try and talk about this situation and the circumstances with people that he trusts, quote unquote. Now, the reason that I opened up with this video with Bonnie Holine talking about her take on the case is because there is something just off about her and her other sisters, Ruby's sisters, who didn't call Ruby out, who didn't try to intervene and help the children. And if you remember from just a few minutes ago, when I played that video, less than 10 minutes ago, she claims she didn't do anything because it wasn't her legal right or responsibility to do so. And she could have gotten put in jail for intervening. And then if she's in jail, she can't do anything to help. So she throws Kevin under the bus. The only person who had the legal right, the legal responsibility, she says, was Kevin. And they were cut off from the entire family. Has some echoes of familiarity for me when my family members cut each other off and stop talking to each other. That's when bad things happen. And that's why I keep talking about it, because I don't want other families to fall victim to the same harmful dynamics. So I'm hoping that by talking about these situations, people will be encouraged to have those open and difficult conversations with the problematic family members in their lives, because it's the only way to prevent tragedies from happening is to get involved early, to be involved often, to call people out on their bad behavior, even if it means losing face, even if it means going to jail. You better believe that 100% I would have been willing to go to jail if it meant preventing the harm of children. Different priorities, I suppose. Thanks, Stephanie Ferraro, for that super sticker. I appreciate you. So again, it's just going to be a very shallow dive this evening. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. I am going to be on Tuesdays with Tim later. If you like a little bit of Mormon weirdness, we have a panel discussion. And tonight we're talking about the things that we are sorry we said when we were Mormon. So now I'm going to go to the lawsuit, and we're going to go through this together. So this is a demand for a jury trial, Kevin Franke versus Jodi Hildebrandt, establishing the fact that the plaintiff is a citizen and legal resident of Utah County, establishing venue there. By the way, before we dig too much into this, I also want to give a shout out to Duty Ron. Duty Ron is a friend of the channel. He's been very kind and generous with me and the causes that I support. And I want to send my heartfelt condolences to him tonight. He lost his African gray parrot that was with him for 35 years. And so I understand he is taking some time away from being on YouTube. So if you know Duty Ron, or if you've ever visited his channel, head on over there and leave a nice comment to let him know that you're thinking about him. I'm thinking about him tonight. So digging into this lawsuit, the defendant is also legal citizen of state of Utah, and at all times relevant, the defendant was a mental health therapist licensed as a clinical mental health counselor, and gives the license number. The said license was ordered to be revoked by the Utah State Division of Professional Licensing on May 10th, 2024. The court has subject matter jurisdiction over this matter, and the court has personal jurisdiction over the defendant. The venue is proper, and it's in accordance with Utah Rules of Civil Procedure. This is a Tier 3 case in that Kevin's claims for damages exceed $300,000. Kevin's completed the pre-litigation requirements of the Utah Healthcare Malpractice Act and has accordingly received a certificate of compliance from the Utah State Division of Professional Licensing. So here are the facts and the background, circumstances surrounding the claim. Kevin and Ruby Franke married in an ecclesiastical ceremony on December 8th, 2000. That means in the temple. During the course of the marriage, 6 children were born. Through their efforts, Kevin and Ruby provided a home and for the personal care and economic needs of their children and lived together as a family. Ruby Franke has never been professionally licensed or certified through Utah State Division of Professional Licensing to provide professional services to the public in any capacity. Though Ruby's personal and business association with through Kevin became acquainted with Jodi Hildebrandt. Prior to 2022 and the incidents giving rise to this action, Jodi engaged Ruby to associate with her in her new Facebook group, quote, Moms of Truth, while Jodi continued practice as a clinical mental health counselor. Jodi had Ruby appear with her on numerous social media posts promoting Jodi's mental health care business. Jodi was also creating, distributing, and selling written materials relative to her mental health care business and which promoted her and said business. This continued on or about August 30th, 2023, when Jodi was arrested, incarcerated, and criminally charged for abusing some of Kevin's children. Now, there's a reference in Shari's book to this Facebook group, Moms of Truth. It said, despite everything, Ruby and Jodi were pushing on with their obnoxious Moms of Truth crusade, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the whole world was turning against them. To be accepted to the Moms of Truth Facebook group, you had to answer questions like, quote, are you willing to be grateful to receive parenting advice from experienced women? Are you willing to be grateful to receive parenting advice? I'm so grateful to receive parenting advice from women who are way more experienced than me. Still, even with the screening, most of the women on that page were secret trolls, oddly fascinated by Ruby's narcissism and cruelty on 8 passengers, curious to see what the hell she was up to now. Pass the popcorn. A child is responsible for 3 things, Ruby preached. A child needs to learn to manage their thoughts, their feelings, and their behaviors, and they need to learn to manage them in truth, which means they're going to be honest, they're going to be responsible, and they're going to be humble with all of that, and that is a lot of responsibility. The sheer hypocrisy was staggering. Ruby and Jodi had crowned themselves the ultimate authorities on motherhood and family, yet their actions spoke volumes about their true nature. Jodi, estranged from both her son and daughter, had no contact with her own children. Ruby, who had cut me off entirely, was now hiding my siblings from the world, their lives shrouded in secrecy and isolation. The internet was ablaze with reactions, particularly on Reddit, where former 8 Passengers fans exposed their shock and disgust at Ruby's trajectory. So that's a little bit about Moms of Truth. Yeah, lots of comments about blanket training, which I hope to talk about a little bit later. Sorry, I was not watching the comments as I'm reading. So if you guys have questions, I'll just ask you to hold them until I call for them so that I can see them in the chat. And lots of love for Duty Ron. Thank you for supporting him in this time. So going back to the lawsuit. Prior to August 30th, 2023, Jodi verbally and through written materials repeatedly promoted and advised Kevin and Ruby Franke of her professional licensing, credentials, reputation, and education as a licensed clinical mental health care professional. She solicited them as patients and to purchase her books and workbooks, which they did. In these books was printed all of her credentials, including that she was licensed in Utah as a clinical mental health counselor. To them, she also commonly referred to herself as a, quote, psychologist, leading the Frankes to believe it. Proof of this is contained in her police interrogation video of August 30th, 2023. During the spring of 2022, Jodi asserted that based on her experience, education, expertise, and observations as a licensed clinical mental health counselor and psychologist, she, without undertaking any assessments, testing, or other formal diagnostic protocol, advised Kevin that she had diagnosed him as being lustful, narcissistic, manipulative, deceptive, controlling, and selfish, and that he needed her professional services to overcome these adverse personality, emotional, and mental health conditions. Now, I want to point out that none of these are mental health diagnoses. Lustful, narcissistic, manipulative, deceptive, controlling, and selfish, none of that is in the DSM except narcissism as a personality disorder and a list of narcissistic traits. But to just call someone narcissistic without formally diagnosing them or testing them for diagnosis is wildly inappropriate, and I'm guessing against the licensing standards that Ruby should have been adhering to. So Jodi also advised Ruby of her, quote, diagnosis of Kevin. She convinced Ruby to support this diagnosis and adopt Jodi's subsequent professional advice for remedial treatment for Kevin and his family. Kevin engaged Jodi's professional services. She undertook to provide him professional mental health services and thereby assumed a heightened position of trust as a licensed healthcare professional in the state of Utah with its attendance duties. Her further professional advice was that Kevin should have no communication or contact with his children because Kevin's personality, emotional, and mental health conditions would have a negative impact on the children and might lead them to adopt these same negative behaviors and conditions. This was mandated by Jodi as a part of Kevin's, quote, treatment. On July 20th, 2022, Jodi and Ruby mandated that as a condition to protect the children and preserve the marriage and family, Kevin and his oldest son, Chad, then 17, should remove themselves from the family home and reside elsewhere and have no communication with the other family members, including Kevin's wife, Ruby. At this point, both Chad and Kevin were paying for her professional services and advice, and Kevin was enrolled in her online men's group therapy. In reliance upon her professional status, education, licensing, and experience, and upon Ruby's adoption of Jodi's advice, Kevin and Chad left the home. Now, I want to put a pin in that for just a second because I'm looking at the idea of having someone tell me to leave my home and my children. And I don't think I would have done it. But again, I wasn't in the situation, and we can talk about that and unpack it in the commentary a little bit later. For right now, I just want to get through the lawsuit. When Jodi found out that Kevin and Chad were residing together, she insisted that they reside separately because by living together, in her view, they would only promote and foster more bad behavior and would enable one another in continuing and exacerbating the circumstances. She thus required that they live separately, not only from their family, but from each other, and that they should cease any further contact. At this point, Chad was paying for his weekly therapy sessions, and she actually raised her price for him to approximately $900 per month. Kevin paid Jodi for his participation in online men's group therapy beginning in July 2022. She requested that Kevin pay through Venmo because, quote, it's easier. Also wildly inappropriate for a therapist to be asking for pay through Venmo. Although I do know some therapists who do it, I don't think it's ethical. Kevin paid between $300 and $375 monthly for his participation in men's group therapy. Group therapy costing $375 a month is nuts. Jodi, knowing of and having observed their family practices and devotion to their religious beliefs and commitments, used her knowledge of Kevin's commitment to his religious beliefs, his marriage and family, to leverage and manipulate him into adopting her unprofessional and deceitful advice. Kevin was paying her and relying upon her professional therapy, his objective being to preserve his family and marriage. She would often tell him that unless there was strict compliance with her mandates, that his soul was in danger of being damned. In addition, during his time of separation, other men Jodi was instructing who were part of her online therapy were directed by Jodi to threaten Kevin that if he did not comply and change quickly, Ruby was going to run out of patience and divorce Kevin. This manipulation made him fear the threatened consequences if he did not maintain absolute and unquestioning compliance with Jodi's mandates. Again, wildly inappropriate to recruit other men in the therapy group to bully another patient. Ridiculous. At the same time, she mandated that Kevin maintain absolute separation from Ruby and their children. Jodi would emotionally and mentally abuse other patients who violated the no-contact separation. She said it was a sign of severe selfishness and unwillingness to honor the wishes of the wife. She would recommend to the wife the need for divorce if the husband purposely broke the no-contact boundary. There were only 2 times in which Jodi encouraged Kevin to have direct communication with Ruby, once in February 2023 and following his termination from BYU in June 2023. Each time, Jodi instructed Kevin to write a letter and list everything that he did that he was told by Jodi that was selfish, entitled, narcissistic, lustful, and manipulative. Jodi would tell Ruby to hold on to these letters to use as evidence for leverage in divorce proceedings, should that be necessary. Again, wildly unethical and inappropriate. Between August 2022 and August 2023, Jodi was extremely mentally abusive to Kevin as he participated in an online men's group therapy run by Jodi. During this time, she frequently berated and belittled Kevin, telling him he was manipulative, deceptive, controlling, narcissistic, lustful, and selfish. She further accused him of being a, quote, lover of darkness, lover of Satan, and accused him of hiding, quote, something very dark and evil. Well, Jodi, you spot it, you got it. If nobody's watched the documentary and seen the scenes of Jodi pretending to be possessed by demons, it is pretty eye-opening. And she withheld her counseling and help unless through coercion he confessed it to her, and she was satisfied that it was all disclosed. Kevin had no idea what she was talking about, which resulted in further incrimination from Jodi. He asked for individual sessions with her so he could work more effectively on these things, but she refused and instead told him to meet with other men who were part of her program. Again, a therapist recruiting men who are her clients to work with other patients, wildly inappropriate. During these group sessions, totaling over 300 hours, Jodi would electronically, privately communicate with other members of the group and share confidential and detailed information about Kevin's family and his struggles. Again, totally unethical. She would then enlist and instruct others using that information to mentally, psychologically, and spiritually abuse Kevin. She would have him called out for his behavior and comments, which she characterized as inappropriate. During her treatment of Kevin, she would also relate to him vivid details of her other patients' lives, activities, and choices. Again, totally inappropriate for a therapist to be doing that. In September 2022, Jodi told Kevin that he was not worthy to hold a temple recommend to enter the temple for the LDS Church. Oh, I'm sorry, Jodi. Who made you bishop? Or did you just declare yourself bishop? Which actually, I've declared myself bishop before. But I wasn't taking away anybody's recommend. I was hoping for inclusion. Anyway, this deeply cut Kevin, as he believed he had been abiding by the tenets that would qualify him for his temple recommend. Her feedback and comments ultimately led Kevin to not attend a meeting to renew his temple recommend in 2023, after Jodi had convinced him that he was not worthy and would be a hypocrite if he attempted to renew the recommend. She further advised him that getting fired from BYU would be the best outcome for his behavior and the best thing for his recovery and healing. She further advised that maybe losing his job would, quote, finally wake him up. She further instructed him that men like him weren't worthy to work at BYU. Because he did not attend the meeting and renew his recommend, he was subsequently fired from his job at BYU in June 2023 because having a temple recommend was a requirement for his employment. Again, BYU, private Mormon university, they have their own requirements. You have to be a temple recommend card-carrying holder in order to teach or work at BYU. After learning that Kevin had lost his job, Jodi then scolded him and declared that it was completely unnecessary and just confirmed that Kevin was a selfish person. So this is gaslighting, again, and manipulation. Unbeknownst to Kevin, beginning in approximately mid-May of 2023 until about August 30th, 2023, Jodi had Ruby and the party's children living at Jodi's home in Ivins, Utah. Jodi never disclosed this to Kevin. During her treatment of him, Jodi was advising Ruby that she should get tested for STDs. Even though Jodi had Ruby and Kevin's minor children living in her own home at the same time, she was, through her professional services for which he was paying her, providing him with counseling services purportedly to help and reunite the family. At the same time, she was isolating from him and abusing his family. The reuniting of the family was the very core stated objective of the services she was providing, but in reality, she was abusing his children and taking drastic steps to distance his family further and further from Kevin and from each other. During the same period of time, in furtherance of disintegrating Kevin's family, Jodi convinced Ruby to initiate plans to acquire a parcel of property in Arizona. As part of that plan, Jodi persuaded Ruby to liquidate financial accounts belonging to Ruby, Kevin, and their children, approximately $80,000. This to facilitate the joint purchase of the out-of-state property to which Jodi and Ruby intended to move with Ruby and the children. This property purchase would have been for the benefit of Jodi at her patient's expense. Now, this sounds oddly familiar to me. There's this plot of like Jodi wanting to be with Ruby, but Kevin's in the way, so she gets rid of Kevin. And then they sort of get rid of the children too, and they have plans to move to this other property and just be together. And this seems to me to be a projection of Jodi's ultimate fantasy, which was to have Ruby all to herself. This was done during a time when Jodi was providing professional services to Kevin, the objective of which was to purportedly reunite the same family which she had isolated from Kevin, abused, and which she was now planning to further isolate from Kevin out of state. Amid all of this, at the same time of Kevin's last men's group on July 26, 2023, Jodi abruptly announced that she was immediately but temporarily suspending Kevin's services with her and advised Kevin that God had told her that Kevin, quote, needed absolute solitude to heal and that he should follow up with her in 6 months to see if he had by then sufficiently humbled and repented yet. She stated that this was to be complete and total isolation and that any communication was limited to God only. Further, that any violation of this would surely cost him his marriage and family. While Jodi had Kevin's wife, Ruby, and his minor children living in her home, Jodi participated and engaged in a course of criminal conduct, severely emotionally, mentally, and physically abusing Kevin's children. So there's the probable cause statement and photos attached as Exhibit B, and for which Jodi was convicted and sentenced to prison. The specific allegations of negligence, which are believed to be below the standards of mental health care for this community, include but are not limited to the following: failure to professionally diagnose and explain to patient from what specific mental health condition he suffered and how such diagnosis warranted applied treatment, failure to institute an appropriate remedial method of treatment, affirmatively misdiagnosing the patient's condition, affirmatively acting to apply unprofessional, inappropriate, and improper methods of treatment within the applicable standard of care, engaging in dual conflicting relationships with patient, member of his family, and other patients, engaging in acts detrimental to the patient's children, contrary to the standard objective of the purported professional advice and services being provided to and paid for by patient. Committing criminal acts against the patient's children, disclosing Kevin's confidential information and communications to and providing advice to the patient's wife, contrary to the patient's best interests and contrary to the stated objective, blah, blah, blah. Engaging in conduct toward her patient that displayed a lack of honesty and candor, was dishonest and designed to benefit the self-interest of Ms. Hildebrandt and was contrary to the mental health and best interests of her patient. Representing herself to be practicing or engaging in a profession, psychology, for which she was not licensed. Engaging in conduct that resulted in a conviction with respect to a crime that, when considered with the functions and duties of the profession for which the license was issued, there's a substantial relationship to the licensee's ability to safely or competently practice the profession. Engaging in conduct that has resulted in disciplinary action, including suspension and revocation by the licensing and regulatory authority under the Division of Professional Licensing for the state of Utah. Practicing a profession regulated under Utah state law through gross incompetence, gross negligence, or pattern of incompetency or negligence. Practicing or attempting to practice a profession requiring licensure under this title by any form of action or communication which is false, misleading, deceptive, or fraudulent. Verbally, physically, mentally, or abusing or exploiting any person through conduct connected with the licensee's practice under this title or otherwise facilitated by the licensee's license. So this generally goes through the number 29, the nature of the alleged injuries and other damages sustained. It generally goes through what has already been stated in the lawsuit, but I will just point out, obviously, mental health ramifications, monetary damages, general damages of physical and emotional pain and suffering, related attorney fees, and damages incurred in reconciling and restoring his family to its former state, and all other damages deemed appropriate. So Kevin incorporates all allegations previously set forth in this complaint into this first cause of action. The defendant owed Kevin a duty of care as a patient. In a vulnerable emotional state, she was in a position of trust. The defendant breached this duty of care using improper mental health care techniques as outlined in the paragraphs listed above. Now, the prayer for relief is for all damages to which he's entitled and that are reasonable in the circumstances: economic damages, non-economic damages, prejudgment interest, attorney's fees, costs, and all such further relief. He's asking for a jury trial, and this was filed on the 22nd of July. So I realize that we are behind the 8 ball just a little bit. Now, I did not download the exhibits that are attached thereto, mainly because they include the disturbing probable cause affidavit in the arrest for Jodi and Ruby. And I didn't want to dig into that tonight because it definitely is disturbing and difficult to deal with. Not that I don't think it deserves attention, but I think it's had a lot of attention. And I think that that was detailed in all of the court cases and the guilty pleas and the sentencing of Jodi and Ruby. So this is a good thing to point out here. She called herself a psychologist in her police interview, and she is not. She has a master's in educational psychology. She's not a psychologist. So I will take a couple of questions. I need to wrap it up here pretty quickly because I'm getting ready to go on Tuesdays with Tim. But I thought it was important to bring this lawsuit out. I'll be interested to see how, basically a judge needs to review this and make a decision about whether or not this is something that needs to go before a jury. It'll be interesting to see if Jodi has some representation that's going to go back and forth with Kevin's attorney or not. And it'll be really interesting to see if she'll just settle. Now, her Ivins, Utah home was up for sale. I believe that it was sold. I'm going to look it up for you right now. It was delisted. It's been listed for sale multiple times, but has since been taken off the market again. The recent delisting occurred just weeks before the premiere of a new investigation discovery documentary about the crimes committed within the house. Can't imagine anybody wanting to live there. I wanted to get you an update as well about the original lawsuit, but all I could find recently is just flooded reports about this new lawsuit. So I don't have anything, unfortunately, for you on that previous lawsuit where he was suing for $5 million, which I think was the cost of Jodi's house, if I remember correctly. I think that the case summary and everything of Jodi and Ruby's case obviously is available. There is one little thing that I wanted to share with you guys. When I was looking into this case and everything that was going on with it, I came across a Reddit post that I thought was interesting. And I'm really curious to know your opinion, beautiful humans, about Kevin's role in this. Yeah, it's like a blueprint for what not to do as a therapist. So I came across this Reddit post of a former student of Kevin Franke, and I just wanted to share this with you, just as a matter of information. Medium Chemist 5719 says, about 10 to 12 years ago, I took a few classes from Dr. Franke at BYU's engineering school. Just saw another post on the topic, and it reminded me. He seemed genuine. He would spend a few minutes at the start of every class relating soil mechanics to the gospel and life, very devotionally, which, by the way, is not unusual for BYU. But he knew his stuff. Engaging lecture style, came and hung out at labs once or twice in the semester. It's not an easy thing to make dirt an engaging topic, but somehow he pulled it off. One time, I got to hang out at his house at a shindig he held. He honestly seemed like a good guy. We ate hot dogs. He showed his kids, little ones back then, and the crowd a silly card trick, and it got everyone, but his son was especially wowed by it. Can't remember if Ruby was there, but I think not. Sorry, dry throat today, guys. During one of the last lectures, during one of my classes with him, he mentioned he was starting a YouTube channel with his family. It was going to be called 8 Passengers because they and their 6 kids were going to be 8 passengers in the van of life and the Holy Ghost as our driver. Looking back on it now, it makes me equal parts sad and nauseated. I never watched it. He also shared a story with us once, which now seems a little personal, but in it, he mentioned Ruby had struggled with depression at an earlier time in their lives. Seems like she ended up struggling with much more than that. I was shocked when the whole thing broke. Thinking through it, I think he was probably a good guy, but fundamentally unprepared for the level of crazy that Jodi brought into his life. That's not one they teach you about in grad school. I seriously hope for nothing but healing and closure for the children and any other innocents in the whole thing. Recovering from trauma like that is not a simple thing. Just thought I'd share. It's good to get that off my chest a bit. Man, it's been a while. Mods, if this is considered to be sharing of overly sensitive information, feel free to remove. I'm still pretty new here. Hopefully enough time has passed that some of the emotional wounds have faded a bit and it can be a safe topic. This was on the ex-Mormon Reddit. So I'm very curious as to what you guys think about Kevin. I have mixed feelings, to be honest with you. I think that while Jodi definitely added gasoline to a fire that was already burning, I'm curious about why it is that Kevin didn't smell the smoke before. Because it's pretty clear from the Hulu documentary that Ruby's behavior towards her children was abusive long before Jodi came into the picture. And it seemed like Kevin was going right along with it. He was behind the camera often, watching Ruby treat his children in horrible ways, say mean things to them, yell at them, ask for things to be edited out. It feels like a lot to blame Kevin for not protecting his children. And I can testify as a survivor of a coercive control marriage that you do get worn down, and going along with the status quo is sometimes the only thing that you can do psychologically because there's so much that is broken. I don't want to judge Kevin too harshly, but I do want to be real about the fact that when it comes to your kids, you know, your own mental health needs to take a back seat sometimes. So I'll be interested to see what you have to say in the comment. Good to see you, Kiki, who we were together last night. This is Kirsten. It's hard to say no to money. As a financial advisor, I've seen people do horrible things for money. It's just sad. Yeah, totally. Kind of reminds me of Tammy Daybell. Darnell Daybell? I think you're meaning Daybell, moving to Idaho for Chad because it was the right thing to do for the family in her mind. GGB says Kevin is a very weak man and loved the 8 passengers fame. I kind of agree with that on some level, but at the same time, I do have a little bit of compassion for how he was controlled. It's just hard. It's really, really hard. Kevin knew what was up and what was down, and he was good with the down. Interesting. I think you also have to consider his culture and environment as well, not making excuses for him. And that's the other thing that bothers me, you guys, is that when I do consider Kevin's culture, it's a patriarchy. It's designed to serve white, hetero, cisgendered males, of which Kevin was a member of that group. So if he wasn't getting his needs met in Mormonism, and he was allowing his wife to completely take over his family and abuse his children, I don't know. I have a hard time with that. Kiki says, I read Sherry's book. I think Ruby was who she was, and Jodi fed into it. I think Kevin wanted to save his marriage above everything else. And I agree that that's true. However, if you really are committed to saving your marriage and loving your kids, are you going to voluntarily leave your own home? I get that Jodi was really controlling. I get that it was scary. I get that he was afraid that he really was going to lose everything. But hear me out. How about you go to another therapist, not Jodi? How's she going to know? Was she bugging his phone? Was she having him followed? I don't think so. So I'm just curious about what other things that he might have tried to do in order to step in for his kids. As a parent of kids whose dad doesn't show up for them, I can give you firsthand data about how damaging that is to a kid's psyche and how difficult it is. Critical thinking is not really welcomed in Mormonism. And so there's that component to consider as well. Thanks for being here with me tonight on True Crime Tuesdays. Please leave your comments. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. Please keep your dialogue respectful. We may disagree, but we can always have civil discourse. And please attack the problem and not the person in your comments. I look forward to being with you guys again. Again, I am going to be covering the Adelson case. Donna is going on trial very soon, and I'm going to be there to watch this narcissistic family ruler get her day in court. As always, take care of yourself.